If you're interested in printing and painting 3D figurines, this is the episode for you. Today, I'm going to teach you how to make this amazing figurine from start to finish. This project was definitely a learning experience for me, so I took everything I learned from this and I turned it into bigger and badder projects in the future. So stay with me on this episode of Tina Tries. So I originally found this file on MakerWorld, but it has since been taken down. So I'm not sure who to give credit to for this file. If you know, please drop a comment in the section below so that I can update this video in the future and give credit where credit is due. This piece was printed on a Bamboo X1 carbon, and I printed it in magenta and yellow PLA. Questionable choices, to be sure, but I will explain that later. I used a 0.4 nozzle and the slim tree supports that were included in the file. So this was my first ever 3D printed figurine that I'd ever done. And I wasn't sure how to change settings or mess with the orientation of the figures or how to smooth layer lines. I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I just sent the file to the printer and let it run. So this file was 3 pieces. It had the floorboard, the chair, and the figure were each separate files. And altogether, it took about 15 hours for this to complete printing, which was just enough time for me to question my choices of PLA color, and also to come back full circle to excitement about painting. So I printed each of the parts in different colors of PLA because I wanted to test how well my acrylic paints were going to color the PLA colors. So for the base, I used yellow, and the chair and the figure were magenta. Heads up, magenta does not cover well, even with primer. It took more than a few coats for her to stop looking like she had lost a paintball fight. So when this finished printing, it had some pretty horrific layer lines because I had no idea how to orient it or how to smooth layer lines or mess with any of the settings to get it to be a smoother finished product. So on this one, the post-processing definitely became my new cardio workout. First came filling and smoothing. I used a plastic filler for the larger gaps in the piece, and then I used an automotive sandable primer and filler. So that filled in the more fine lines on the entire figure as a whole. Then I started sanding. I sanded this with an 80, a 100, and a 120 grit sandpaper, basically every grit I could without sanding it into another dimension. The trick on this was reducing the layer lines without getting rid of the detail. So I wanted to sand it, but not erase all of her facial features. The chair was by far the worst part, but eventually I figured that if I sanded it and filled it just enough, I could make it look like the grain of the wood on the chair. So that kind of worked out in my favor in the end. I'm really happy with how that looks. Painting this was equal parts fun and stressful. I used acrylic paints and a ton of reference stills from the show just to get the colors right and kind of her whole look. So for the acrylics that I used for this piece, I used these apple barrel matte colors as well. Folk art neon blacklight paints. I also used this Deco Art metallic color for her pistol and all of the little accents in her hair and on her outfit. On the floorboards here, I did kind of a general brown color, and then I went back in with a darker wash, and I also used a skinnier brush to accent some of the wood grain in the floorboards, which I think came out pretty well. After I did the first layer of her skin color, she had a pretty scary haunted porcelain doll vibe to her. So I ended up doing a very faint pink wash, which is watering down a pink color and just kind of brushing it on in very small amounts. And if it pools anywhere, you can use a paper towel and mop it up a little bit, but you just brush it on lightly over the top, and that gave her skin a nice pinkish tone to it, which made her look slightly less scary. So I was happy with that. Then I added some of her tattoos on here. The stripes on the pants were kind of tricky because I ended up freehanding those. There weren't any outlines on the pants themselves that I could follow. So that was a little tricky. I think I painted over those a few times too before I got them looking pretty good. Getting her eyes just right took me a lot more tries than I care to admit. The worst part was her right eye here because these bangs don't move and they don't detach from the figure. So it was kind of tricky getting in underneath here to get that eye looking exactly like the left eye. So there was a lot of painting and then covering it back up and then trying it again, probably 3 or 4 times before I got that to be the way that I was pleased with it. So the beauty of this is that if you mess it up, you can always cover it up with paint or you can sand it off. It's never a mistake. You can always go back and fix it. You just have to keep trying until you get it the way that you like it. Then it wouldn't be Jinx without some graffiti. So I decided it would be really cool to try out blacklight activated paints. So I got blue, purple, pink, and green, and I went to town on this whole figure. So she's got blue highlights in her hair, her purple bootlaces, the bandages. She's got a lot of graffiti on her pistol like she did in the show. And I also loaded up her chair with some of her iconic graffiti. I have the monkey, I have powder, and when we shine the black light on this, they all show up pretty well. Most of these blacklight colors took a few coats to get it to really start showing under the black light. It is a very thin paint, but if you have patience and you just keep tracing over what you've done, it does come out really well. So once I was happy with the paint job, I sealed this with a clear spray-on sealant. It was an automotive sealant, and obviously it was a gloss finish. This was before I knew that Mod Podge could be used as a sealant. So in hindsight, I probably would not have done the gloss finish on most of this, but it still looks pretty good. All 3 pieces seat together, and I glued them together with miter apple. Looking back, I have learned a ton since this build. First off, I would definitely slow down the printer speed when doing the figure. Having a slower printer speed allows for the detail to be more defined, and it also reduces the layer lines quite a bit. I also would use regular supports as opposed to the tree supports. So the tree supports are good when you need just one local area to be held up, but when you have an entire face that has peaks and valleys and everything, I found that using regular supports encases the entire figure and it keeps the detail more crisp. I would definitely tweak the file settings to allow for finer details and far fewer layer lines. That would greatly reduce the post-processing slog, and it would allow me to get to the fun part of painting a lot faster. So here it is. It's not perfect, but I am really proud of this piece. Jinx marked the very start of my journey into 3D printed figurines. This project taught me patience, problem solving, and also it was fascinating watching a spool of plastic turn into one of my favorite characters, and then painting it really brought it to life. And you can do this too. So here are a few of the things that I learned. Acrylic paint sticks really well to PLA even without primer, but you definitely need to seal your finished project or you risk scraping the paint off down the road. Your base PLA color makes a difference. If you're going to be doing figurines, I recommend printing them in white or black as they are the easiest to cover. The magenta was a little bit of a challenge on this one, so I don't recommend using pink unless you're going to be showing the pink through in the figurine somewhere. Filling and sanding out any imperfections from printing on your figures is always an option. Just bear in mind that if you over sand them, you can lose some of the detail, which you don't really want to do on a figure. So just sand them sparingly. I will be building and painting even bigger, badder figures in the future, including a huge Deadpool and Wolverine diorama, using everything that I learned from this start print right here. Stay tuned for the Deadpool and Wolverine episode in a few weeks. So if you liked this video and you want to see more painting and more projects in the future, please consider liking and subscribing. Drop a comment in the section below or give me a suggestion for another project. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.